Welcome to the ninth episode in Mohammed's criminal enterprise. I am your host, Yada, Craig Winn, and this is the YAHOWAH blog. We are broadcasting, live streaming from the Rainbow Room. This, of course, is a famous character in this presentation. This is Wookie Winn. And Wookie is, as you can see, dressed for the show. What we have to cover is, I think, the most despicable words ever attributed to a wannabe God. And the reason they are so disgusting is because in this case, the wannabe God is Satan. That's the truth about Allah. The more one understands the Quran, and I've written 825 volumes on the Quran, translated and presented the entire Quran, and actually done something that no one heretofore has done. I set the entire Quran into the context of Muhammad's life, reordering it in chronological order so that it could be understood. And there is no more despicable book ever written. The Quran is, by any standard, the worst example of a book ever. It is deadly, diabolically so. It's demonic. It's sexist. It's grotesquely immoral. It is plagiarized. It is argumentative. It is repetitive. It is inaccurate historically and scientifically. It has no redeeming qualities. I constantly encourage people not to burn the Quran, but instead to not only read it, but share it. Because the more people know about the Quran and the Hadith, the less opportunity Muslims and the progressives now who sponsor them have to fool more people into believing that it is somehow moral and appropriate, when it is just flat out despicable. So in the most grotesque situation imaginable, the tormented terrorist known as Mohammad recited the most diabolical suratan of them all. He claimed that his sadistic partner in crime, the ungod Allah, vowed that killing was a religious duty and that thievery was a sacred right. The result is called al-Anfal, the spoils of war. And recognize, we're just talking about common thievery. There was no war. The Quran's 8th chapter was revealed in the immediate aftermath of the Islamic baptism of blood at Badr. The deadly raid was launched from Yathrib, where apart from the newly minted Muslims, no one cared one way or another about the never-ending argument between Muhammad and his extended family. And for the most part, the people knew that the terrorist raid's adaptation of Islam was sanctifying an assault, armed robbery, kidnapping, and mass murder, and that these things were wrong. And so to silence the dissent and the moral voice of recent converts, and to validate the emerging terrorist manifesto, Allah revealed a new and different reality, one forged with silver and with swords. Muslims were not to bemoan some spilled blood. In fact, with Islam's New Testament, blood would be the new baptism, and with it, a generous pardon. All of the other rules would still apply. Lots of prostrations and obeying the rabbi and his Rasul, But fighting to kill was now mandated. Believers must be, disbelievers, I should say, must be humiliated and die. It's exactly as we saw the Islamic State under the pretext of HTS. Torment the Alawites and the Christians that they would kill by having them walk around as on all fours like dogs and bark, and then beg and plead for mercy, then gleefully killing them. Since the nonprofit and his ungod couldn't win the argument on its merits, they would annihilate the opposition. Then, to make stealing and murder seem sanctimonious, Satan, in the guise of Allah, said that there were 1,000 invisible demons helping out. It was the gospel truth, the happy tidings of Islam's resurrection. Painful for me to share this with you, but it's something that we must all come to know so that we can turn Islam's Quran against these mass murderers before they annihilate everyone on the planet. Quran 8:1. They ask you about the spoils of war. Say the spoils of war for Lillahi and the Rasuli. So fear Allah and adjust everything between you and obey Allah and his Rasul, messenger, if you are believers. Yes, there were some moral people still surrounding Muhammad. We call them, they're called moderate Muslims today. Allah does not call them moderate Muslims. He calls them hypocrites. And he tells the good Muslim jihadists, killer Muslims, to assassinate the former Muslims who are now hypocrites so that Allah can torture them in the hottest places in hell. So these malcontents were saying, what's the story here? You're pretending to be religious, and yet all you're really doing is gloating over booty and blood. So Allah wanted to set them straight. They ask you about the spoils of war. Say that spoils of war, I forgot the verb, but are for Lillahi. It's one of the many names in the Quran where Allah's name is actually never shown. And the Rasuli means messenger. So fear Allah. They want you to believe that's Allah, but it's written as Allah. It is the for him. Actually, in this case, it would be the for her. And adjust everything between you and obey Allah and his Rasul, messenger. If you are believers, obey, submit, and obey. It is the nature of Islam. Yes, the first Muslims went out on a terrorist raid, and it produced booty and blood. And so when people complained that that was immoral, the Islamic wannabe God said, adjust your thinking between me and the messenger and obey. Now, one of the things here that's really interesting, of course, is to obey Allah, you must fight to the death, killing for him. It's repeated throughout the Quran. To obey Muhammad, you have to know what he said and did, which means that these hadith that we have been sharing are essential. And to obey Muhammad, you would be obeying a pedophile, a rapist, a man who was incestuous. You would be obeying a man who treated women like animals and enslaved them so that they had absolutely no rights and beat them. You would be obeying a man who was a ruthless and repetitive terrorist, who was a mass murderer, who was genocidal, who was an anti-Semite and racist, who was a thief, a con artist, a mass murdering thug. That is what the Quran just said. Muhammad's propensity to rob his own family was obviously being scrutinized. So while this was crass and contradictory, it was convenient. The prophet, spelled with an F-I-T, claimed that his demons said, "Back away and shut up. The booty is ours. Sure, we lied. But you are a slave, so obey. You have no rights. You have no voice in this matter. There's no free will and Islam. So now that you know we kill for our jollies, it's best you get over it. Besides, this is what you signed up for, Muslim." Mohammed had continued. Excuse me. Asher, get up. Excuse me. My other four-legged friend decided that, well, there's a pad that is designed to mute echoing sounds under which the cord for the microphone goes. And so she decided that it would be more comfortable to lay down and take a nap on it. So I hope that she has not pulled out the cord. We will do the best we can to continue. Sorry for the interruption. Muhammad had contributed nothing of value. He coveted, he cursed, he blabbered, he lied. He gloated and became delusional while congratulating and contradicting himself all at the same time. Then he seized control of the booty by providing his own handy Siratan. In the process, he demonstrated that the Quran was anything but what he had claimed of it, belying any possibility that it was penned long ago as God's final message to humankind. The most reprehensible and self-serving Siratan addresses a disagreement between meaningless and a moronic band of malcontent and murderous mercenaries. Yes, indeed, that would be the thing that God would focus on, isn't it? Solving a disagreement between a moronic band of malcontent and murderous mercenaries. Not only is everyone coveting stolen property, but the greediest liars are actually Allah and his Rasuli, the ultimate profiteer. This is not a good look. If you're a Muslim or out there parading with them as a progressive retard. There's no appeal to reason because there's no justification for any of this. These men had committed a horrible crime, all while deceiving themselves and future generations of Muslims. Muhammad's ruthless gang was reprehensible and their wannabe God was pathetic. Had there been a righteous man among them, he would have killed them all to free their captives and to protect the innocent from the inevitable future attacks. But alas, there wasn't a man or woman in Yathrib, perhaps in all of Arabia, with the character and courage to do the right thing. And yes, even as a man of words and not fists, given the opportunity, I would have eliminated them to spare billions. As a matter of fact, a little over 8 years from now, I will be given this opportunity and I will do to them what they deserve. Muslims cannot be cured. because there was and remains no way to reason with them. The Qurisha tried, but because Mohammad was insane, it led to them being demonized, robbed, and abducted, even murdered. These men had blood on their hands. They had confessed to their heinous crimes, and they were bragging about doing it all over again and again and again. And they did. Within the first 10 centuries, Islam would claim the lives of 200 million people, a third of the population of the planet. And they would plunder and rape and abuse 200 million more. The calculus is moral here and simple. By taking the worthless lives of these 300 mass murderers, along with the true frauds inspiring them, all of whom were guilty and deserved to die for what they had done, a righteous man would have spared the world from a pandemic that would claim, ultimately, 3 billion souls. Clearly, there was no Moshe, Moses, or David among them. As a result, the plague of Islam spread, deceiving, debilitating, dehumanizing, destroying, and damning humankind. But the Jews who witnessed this were without excuse, because they had been forewarned and they were accomplices. They sold Talmud readings to Mohammed so that he could turn this terrorist declaration into a religious document. Now, looking back now at what was said and done, it's evidence that one spoke of another in Dabadim words, Deuteronomy 18. Moshe explained what would happen to the children of Israel if God's people failed to capitalize upon what Dowd would achieve and then failed to forestall the rise of this false prophet by ignoring the test that Yahweh had provided immediately thereafter. The rabbis in Yathrib dithered, even doing business with this murderous man among them. They provided housing, loans, and Talmud recitals. And as a result, millions of Jews have lost their lives, and Muslims have become too numerous to eliminate. They are now a toxic tide, poised to flood into Israel and to annihilate God's people. And make no mistake, the next time that Muslims attack, it won't be 3,000 of them, but closer to 3 million. And it won't be 1,200 Jews who die, but well over 1 million. And it's all really because too few, even amongst God's people, are willing to face the truth that it isn't Hamas that is their enemy. It's Islam. And this has been true now for 14 centuries. It takes a lot of denial to put yourself in their position and not admit the truth. But then again, Jews are good at denial. They've denied Yahweh for 3,000 years. Even erased his name. So now all that can be done is to return to the specialty, really, of Moses and Dowd and use words. They were expert at it. They wielded words wisely. So this was written to be read today, to awaken Israel to the pain they have brought upon themselves and the world by ignoring Yahweh and by preferring their many words and names to his words and name. And now, since this is the only message capable of saving a remnant of Israelites, I interrupt Satan's Siratan with the very word of God, Yahweh. It reads, "Indeed, when you come upon the land, which for the benefit of the relationship Yahweh, your God, is giving you, you should not accept, learn, teach, accept, or imitate. You should not instruct, be trained in, or become accustomed to. That such that you act upon and engage in any semblance of the disgusting religious rites and political practices of the Gentiles, their idolatrous mythologies, repulsive and loathsome rituals, abominable festivals of people from different ethnicities and races." Debatim, words, Deuteronomy 18:9. "There should not be found among you one causing his son or daughter to pass over and perish in a fire." Someone predicting the future based upon pagan religious notions. A person who obscures the truth and believes in spiritualism. Or one who tempts and charms others. An individual who entices and seduces people to worship and pray. Debatim 18:10. One who joins in and binds together by forming political and religious alliances. One who is obsessed with ghosts, making requests of saints, or speaks on behalf of those who have previously passed away. A con man who beguiles an association with demonic spirits, or one who causes the premature death in association with a destructive plague. Debatim 18:11. For indeed, all who engage in and act upon these things are an abomination, considered abhorrent and detestable to Yahweh. And so, as a consequence of this repulsive religious excrement, this filth, Yahweh, your God, will drive them out, dispossess them, and destroy them from your presence. Debatim 18:12. You can actually become completely and continually perfected by being consistently right with Yahweh, your God. By comparison, these people from different races and places who you shall dispossess and remove, they listen to false prophets who obscure the truth with myths. And they believe in antiquated religious notions and invalid opinion makers. But as for you, this is not the correct way Yahweh, your God, has offered to you for you to approach. Debatim 18:14. A prophet, a Nabi, a person inspired by God, who communicates and records the testimony of God, from among your midst, from your brethren, similar to me. Yahweh will raise up and position to take a stand which establishes and affirms you. To him, I want you to actually and continually listen. Devarim 18:15. This is consistent with everything which you requested of Yahweh your God in Choreb during the day of the assembly, when you said, never again let me hear the voice of Yahweh, my God, nor let me see and witness this intense fire anymore, lest I die. I'm so sad for God's people. My life is devoted to restoring what you did wrong, to getting you to admit that what you did was grotesquely wrong. You told God to shut up and go away. And so Moshe is telling you that he knows that you are going to chase after the ways of the Goyim, and that you're going to honor the dead, citing deceased rabbis, and that you are going to become religious and you're going to become political, and that these things will corrupt and destroy you. And he's even warned you about the likes of Mohammad and Paul, the founders of the religions most belligerent towards you. And then what he says is that there will be a prophet, a Nabi, like me. Moshe and Dode were both prophets. And they were alike again because they were two of the three Zeroah. The greatest term really Yahweh can afford a person. And that this person will be Jewish, be like you, and this come from your midst. And that he will speak to you and you should listen to him. Because, well, you've stopped listening to God. And so the closest that anyone will ever be to God, or that his words will be closer to God's own heart, is Dode David. Which is why I spend so much time trying to reacquaint you, Yisrael, with your Messiah, the very Son of God, with your prior defender and shepherd and returning king, and your Savior. Therefore, Yahweh said, that is actually better that they have appropriately conveyed their preference. They've responded as expected under the circumstances, communicating what they want regarding their relationship, and I will accept it. The bottom 18:7. Because you told God to shut up and to go away, Israel, and you haven't relented on that. Yahweh, from that point on, only spoke to you through men he had chosen. Moshe, of course, was one of them. Dode was the most important among them. At this moment in time, I am that man. I will raise up and establish Kum, a prophet for them, someone who speaks for me, from among their brothers, similar to you. He's speaking of the greatest man who ever lived, God's chosen one, the anointed Messiah, the one man whom Yahweh said, you are my son and I am your father, not once but 3 times. And I will put my words in his mouth and he will convey them. Everything which, for the benefit of the relationship, I instruct him. 18:8. Dode wrote some 100 Psalms, some 25 Proverbs. He is the primary subject of Kings, Chronicles. No one's words, no one's deeds, no one's life, from antiquity is better known than Dod. And Yahweh has instructed us through him. And it shall come to be that an individual who will not listen to my words, which he shall declare in my name, I myself will seek it of him and hold him accountable for it, requiring it of him. Dabarim, Deuteronomy 18:19. I am warning you, Israel, that since you said you would not listen to your God chose to speak through Dod, his beloved son, his chosen one, the one he anointed, the one who decided that he would fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Makodim so that you might live, the one whom you have spit in his face because you have denied those things. You even foisted a false Messiah in replacement of him. As a matter of fact, one of you, a rabbi, conceived the most popular religion in the world by robbing him of these accomplishments and of these accolades. You're going to be held accountable for these things. That's not every Yehudim, but it's most. It's time you change your thinking, Israel, to God, about God, if you're going to survive these next 8 years. Well, this is among the least understood and the most misappropriated declarations in the Torah. To set the scene, Yahweh had asked Moshe to gather the children of Israel so that he could speak directly to them. The purpose of this was to affirm that everything Moshe had been conveying to them had indeed been inspired by God. Yahweh was doing what Allah could not. He was providing proof. While Yahweh achieved his objective of demonstrating that he was responsible for the Torah's guidance, the Israelites were uncomfortable being around the brilliance of Yahweh's presence. The exemplary nature of his character, the tenor of his voice was beyond what these irascible people with a bad attitude could handle, which is just as God expected. So, for the Almighty, this was the ideal outcome, really, especially under the circumstances. Not only did he prove that he was speaking through Moshe, rather than having to endure communicating with these Israeli malcontents on a daily basis, he could continue to inspire the man he had chosen, a man of exemplary character and intellect, Moshe, and other men he would choose thereafter. He could avoid you and still communicate to you. It is likely that these overtly cantankerous Israelites were concerned that God would peer into their minds and souls and recognize that they were not that far removed from their brethren who had conspired to craft and worship the golden calf. Men have long preferred gods they conceive because they can speak for them and they can manipulate them to serve their most wretched cravings. Consider what the rabbis say on behalf of Hashem, what Paul wrote of his Christ, or Mohammad recited this day regarding his wannabe God. The truth is, most men and women want nothing to do with Yahweh. They prefer fake gods who, by design, are quite similar to them and more accepting of them. They rather like a God they can influence with their prayers and their deeds. Most men and women prefer them as puny and pathetic, as malleable and contradictory, as are they. A God befitting the people is easy enough to make. Humankind has produced untold quantities of them, including Hashem, Jesus, and Allah. Get enough people to believe based upon the monumental edifices erected and the scriptures attributed to them, and a God is born. They grow in stature by building religions around them, by telling the skeptics that they are going to be tortured in hell, and the compliant that they will be rewarded in heaven. The more popular they become, the more godly they appear. Throughout history, in every race and place, men and women have shaped their cultures and their lives around the gods they have fabricated. And with most prevalent are Jesus now and Allah. And where there is a false God, a real God is not welcome, because he threatens to undermine their religious enterprise. Now, 3,470 some years after Moshe's admonition was spoken and scribed, really nothing has changed. On this day, the people pleaded with Moshe to intervene, to silence the voice of God and remove his light. Well, that would normally be considered a giant stride back into Mitzrayim, even a return to Babel. It is what Yahweh had anticipated. It is the reason that he asked Moshe to engage with him to liberate his people. It is the reason God was revealing the Torah through this lone individual rather than to numerous messengers over time. It is why he fulfilled the Mikra with his beloved son, Dod, and not alone. It is why I am speaking these words to you today at his request. On Towrah, Day of the Herald, in 2001, I agreed to work with Yahowah to expose and condemn Islam. Prophet of Doom was my best effort at the time, when I did not know my heroes, Moshe and Dod, very well, nor their God. 23 and a half years later, and having devoted my life to changing that for my benefit and for God's people, there are now 35 books presented at YAHOWAH.com under the title Yada Yahowah. However, Prophet of Doom was not among them. It was not nearly good enough to be part of that collection. I had learned too much over the intervening years. Therefore, on the morning of October 7th, 2023, as Muslims were behaving as they had at Badr, I knew that Prophet of Doom had to be updated to include what I knew of Moshe, Dod, and Yahowah. It would be the ultimate antidote for God's chosen. I have posted 7,000 tweets on X in the 2 months I have been there. Always the same thing. Stop mislabeling your enemy as Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and Islamic Jihad. Start calling them what they are, because until you recognize that it is Islam that is at war with you, that is trying to perpetrate genocide against you, you have no chance of defending yourself from them. And it is exceedingly rare that I get a Jew to listen. They will continue to use terms like Hamas and terrorist and Palestinian, when these are just distractions from the real problem, which is Mohammad, Allah, the Quran, and Hadith. Well, clearly those individuals and books are disgusting. And I wanted to complete the beloved volume of Coming Home, which would be the third volume of that series. So when I asked God later that day if I could forego rewriting Prophet of Doom and continue what we were doing, he was direct and piercing. I have taken care of you. So now you take care of my people. It took another 6 months. And on the cusp of Chag Matzah in year 5991 Yah, I find myself and this relationship with Yah now honoring my heroes, Moshe and Dod, and caring for Yisrael the best way possible, all while exposing and condemning Islam. And I should correct that. That was scribed in year 5991 Yah on the cusp of Chag Matzah. We are now a month from Chag Matzah in year Yah 5992. I want to be accurate with you. The previous 1,000-page edition of Prophet of Doom has now been augmented, and it's retitled, comprising 4,200 pages, 4 times longer. In Goddamn Religion, Snake, Satanic Submission, Slaughter, and Sunnah and Siratan. Individuals are few and far between who listen to Yahweh and who accept him on his terms, and fewer still engage doing as he has instructed. And so while there are now many covenant members who work with me to publish and promote Yahweh's message and help me convey it here as part of the Yahowah blog, when it comes to the translations and insights themselves, these books have been written as a collaborative effort between the 7 spirits of Yahweh and the Choder, the secondary branch, sucker, and club, giving the old roots and stump of Yisrael a new life while holding the religious and political accountable. This was all explained in Yashaya 11. It is consistent with the way Yahweh has engaged with his people from the beginning. Whether it was Adam or Noach, Abraham or Jacob, Shamuel or Dod, Zechariah or Malachi, or now with the Bashar Herald, Yahweh has been consistent. With very rare exceptions, he has chosen 1 or 2, and usually just one individual with whom to engage and through whom to communicate with Yisrael. And seldom, if ever, does God work alone. Yahweh does not want to intimidate us or have anyone worship him. He is an advocate of free will, and he wants nothing more than to develop a familial relationship with us. We approach our God through evidence and reason and by choice, not because he is so visible and loud, fearsome, that he cannot be denied. This is the reason we were created. It is the reason the covenant exists. In this particular prophecy, the predicted individual would be a Yisraelite and a prophet, of which there were some 20 men from this point forward. Only half of those leaving a written legacy scribed by their own hand. Of them, the 2 most prolific were Moshe and Dod, the 2 mighty Zeroah. Shamuel, Yashaya, and Yirmiah would also leave an indelible written legacy to explain the past and to predict the future. Yahweh, Yosha ben Nun, Hosha, Chabauk, Yoel, Shalomo, Amos, Zephaniah, Zechariah, and Malachi also left impressive written reports. Each of these prophets is irrefutable and undeniable because they were inspired by God in such a way that everything they wrote proved to be accurate, and they wrote in Yahweh's name. This, of course, is the antithesis of Mohammad, Allah, and the Quran. Of Yahweh's Nabi, masculine singular, only one rises to the level of Moshe, and that is David. Moshe explained the Mikre, and Dod fulfilled them. Moshe conveyed the Bereth, and Dod embodied it. Upon his return, Yahweh will be arriving with his chosen Mashiach, Melech, Ra'ah, and Ben, Messiah, King, Shepherd, and Son. His chosen one, Dod, who is our Yasser, Savior. And it is to the lyrics of his Mizmor Psalms and to the prose of his Mashal Proverbs that God wants us to listen. This predicted individual cannot be Moshe because he was speaking of another like him. It cannot be Jesus because even if he existed, which he didn't, he wrote nothing for anyone to read, so we cannot listen to him. And it cannot be Mohammed because he spoke in the name of Allah and he was not a prophet. And he murdered and enslaved Jews rather than liberating and saving them. As for Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Zechariah et al., they were prophets, Israelites, and wrote prolifically, but they were many, not one. Moreover, the potential candidates of them, only two liberated and saved God's people, Moshe and Dod. By saying that the Nabi will come from your midst and from your brethren, we are assured that he will be a Yisraelite, a descendant of Jacob. And because Moshe and your, not my, in this discussion was used by the Loe, the promised prophet would be of another tribe. After already announcing that he would be a Nabi engaged in another Yatza by indicating that he would be similar to me, Moshe was revealing that he would be supremely intelligent, a great writer and orator, an outstanding leader and liberator, someone who was chosen and equipped by Yahweh to shepherd his flock. Apart from Moshe, there was only one other man, Dod. Muhammad, of course, is disqualified on all accounts. We'd be wise to listen to Yahusha ben Nun, to Samuel, to my favorite Yashaya, even to Yirmiyah and Hosea and Yoel, as we are to Dod. But while their messages are compatible as individuals, they are not comparable. Dod's life and lyrics go well beyond any of them, providing a prophetic narrative regarding the future of Israel because he is Israel. And he is the living embodiment of the covenant. He is the Son of God. He is the shepherd. And we are afforded the opportunity to follow him into the promised land. He is our king once we are there. Without Moshe, Israel would have become extinct in Mitzrayim. Without Dod, they would have been overcome by their enemies 3,000 years ago. If not for his Chag Matzah sacrifice, we would all be estranged from God. And if not for his return to fulfill Yom Kippurim, Israel would be obliterated by Muslims. He is the one who will stem the toxic tide. Yahweh brought Dod out of obscurity, raised him above all Yisrael, and established him as the Mashiach, Ra'ah, Ben, and Melech, as well as his Nabi prophet. God placed his words in his mouth, evidence of which we find throughout the Mizmor and the Mashal, as he sang them to us. God's Son, followed in his father's footsteps, doing as Yahweh instructed. And because of this, God is expecting us to know what he wrote for us to read. His words, after all, define the relationship Yahweh wants to achieve with those who seek to be part of his covenant family. We're wise to recognize and to accept Dod's unique position in the heart of Yahweh's story. The man who arose to enlighten us in year 3000 Yah opened the door to life in year 4000 Yah as our Savior, and he will be returning in year 6000 Yah as our King. He is our shepherd, and he has served as the Lamb. Those who do not recognize him will not be recognized or accepted by Yahweh. And that's the moral of the story. It is why Yada Yahowah leads through observations to coming home, where Dod's Mashal and Mizmor are king. It is at this point that Moshe's pronouncement that he declared false prophets of like Mohammad deadly. The Torah text reads, with absolute certainty, the person who proclaims a message on behalf of a deity, who deliberately oversteps their bounds and speaks arrogantly and presumptuously, defiantly, concocting a rebellious scheme. Asher Zid, who has an inflated sense of self-worth, insolently demonstrating self-reliance while becoming insubordinate, who conceitedly pretends to know, insults others, and is disrespectful, displaying pride in pursuit of personal recognition and acclaim, while despising rivals, who intentionally rebels against that which is established and is prone to rage, who sees with anger and is repeatedly furious, overbearing, and rude, while insolently promoting their own plans for the express purpose of conveying words under my reputation and designation. I have not expressly appointed, taught, or authorized, nor directed him. To convey or these things, or one who speaks in the name of other gods, then that prophet is actually deadly. Debating Deuteronomy 18:20. Well, see you later, manipulator. It's off to Sheol for the most egregious false prophet of all time. He is the poster child for this statement in Debatim 18. So while Muslims claim that Muhammad was mentioned in the Torah, he is. He is the false prophet who is deadly. Now, returning to the rudeness of the first Muslims, this hadith from one of Muhammad's companions seems to concur with my assessment. Ishaq 3:21. The spoils of war, surah, was handed down because we quarreled about the booty. So Allah took it away from us and gave it to his apostle. When he did, we learned to fear Allah and to obey his messenger. The hadith goes on to report, for in truth, our army had gone out with the prophet and seeking the caravan because we wanted its booty. We learned to fear Allah and obey Mohammed. For in truth, our army had gone out with the prophet seeking the caravan because we wanted its booty. The Quran was recited to control people through fear, intimidation, mind-numbing rituals, indoctrination, taxation, humiliation, and slavery. So after saying Quran 8:1, they ask you about the spoils of war, say the spoils of war are for Lillahi and the Rasuli. So fear Allah and adjust everything between you to obey Allah and his messenger if you are believers. The ungod of Islam allegedly added Quran 8:2. The believers, to the exclusion of all else, are those when Allahu is mentioned, feel fear in their hearts. When his verses are recited to them, they increase them in faith. Upon their Lord, they put their trust. In Quran 8:3, those who consistently perform the obligatory prayer, and out of what we provide them, spend. Fear and obey. Believe, perform, and provide. That is the message. Conditioning men to be submissive through the implementation of religious rituals was part of the strategy to motivate them to loot more often and cough up what they had stolen. You see, what they're told to spend is explained elsewhere. They must spend in Allah's cause. So even the 80% that the Muslim mercenaries got to keep of the stolen goods, it had to be returned back to the common cause of annihilating all humankind. Well, next, the rabbi of murder and mayhem recalibrated the ranks. Had he previously provided a list of bad things, earning a romp in the brothel, but that was no longer good enough. With Islam 2.0, terror and death would reign supreme. So they would have to be supremely rewarded. Quran 8:4. Those are the true believers. For them are ranks and grades with their Rabbi, Lord, and a pardon with a generous provision. Why would you need a pardon if you were doing something that was good? If killing and stealing were supposedly good, what's the purpose of a pardon? Or does Allah, as Satan, actually know the truth that thievery and mass murder are bad? And so what he's doing as Satan is saying, but if you fight to the death and kill for me, if you plunder other people and steal so that we can be more effective together at killing, I'll give you a pardon. And then on top of that, I'll promise you a generous reward. And what do you think the value of that pardon is? And where do you think that reward is provided? How about nothing and hell? Should one have to ask who received the exalted grades of honor, the bountiful provision, then, well, you haven't been paying attention. The answer is Muslim militants who leave their homes and rob and murder non-Muslims. Quran 8:5. As your rabbi, this would be Lord, brought you out from your home in truth to fight, while lo, verily, some believers were adverse to it. They dispute and argue with you concerning the truth after what was made clear, as they were driven to death with their eyes wide open. Truth has an odious stench in the Quran. It is always encapsulated in deception. For example, while they would all die, making the world around them far worse, at this moment, these Muslims were being driven to kill. And their eyes were not wide open, which is why they were so easily deceived. This particular verse was addressing the rift between the good, murderous Muslims and the bad, peaceful ones. Good Muslims were ready, willing, and able to plunder and kill. They celebrated it. just as they are today. The bad, peaceful Muslims, however, wanted to live and let live. But peace was something Allah would never tolerate. Quran 8:7. And when Allahu promised you one of the two groups for you, you wanted the other, the unarmed one. But the one which was armed would be for you because Allahu intended to prove and justify the truth by his words and cut off the roots of the disbelievers. To cut off the roots means to obliterate them, perpetrate genocide against them, to kill all of them. He's using a metaphor here, but what happens when you pull up the roots, a plant up by its roots? It dies. So here he is saying, Allah didn't promise diddly squat, but nonetheless, there were two groups. It's saying, Muslims, you wanted the unarmed one, the one with all of the riches. But it's the armed one, and they were lightly armed, that would be for you because Allahu wanted to justify his word by killing, by annihilating the disbelievers. The truth is that Islam exists to perpetrate genocide on all humankind. The men that were killed on this day were the custodians of the Kaaba, the very people who had promoted and conceived Islam. Allah didn't care who he killed or who his Muslim goons killed, just so long as they were killing. Well, this verse confirms that Mohammed was a sand pirate, not a general or a prophet, and that his God was enticing mass murder. It devastates Islam's credibility. And yet, since its heinous message is often missed, let's consider some other translations of some of the most fearsome words ever attributed to a wannabe God. This is from the Muhammad Assad translation. And lo, God gave you the promise that one of the two hosts would fall to you, and you would have liked to seize the less powerful one, whereas it was God's will to prove the truth to be true in accordance with his words and to wipe out the last remnant of those who denied the truth. Mass murder. Safi Kaskas. God promised you that one of the two enemy groups would fall to you, and you wanted to fight the weaker one. God willed the truth to prevail in accordance with his words and to wipe out the unbelievers. Mass murder. That is the truth. And Islam directly from Allah. Muhammad Mahmud Ghali, his translation. As Allah promised you, the pronouns you and yours are plural. One of the two sections should be yours, and you would like that the one other than the countered, i.e., owning accoutrement, the armed section, a parenthetical, should be yours. And Allah willed to uphold truthfully the truth by his words and cut off the last trace, in parenthetical, literally the rear hind part, the asses of the disbelievers. Muhammad Sawar's translation. When God promised to grant you, believers, victory over either one of the two groups, you wish to have control over the unarmed one. God decided to prove to you the truth of his promises and to destroy the unbelievers. genocide. Muhammad, Shalil, International Translation. Remember, O believers, when Allah promised you one of the two groups that it would be yours, and you wished that the unarmed one would be yours, but Allah intended to establish the truth by His words and to eliminate the disbeliever. Mass murder. Ahmed Ali, one of the most popular translations. Paraphrase, really. Through God, though God promised that one of the two columns would fall to you, you desired the one that was not armed, but God wished to confirm the truth by His words and wipe the unbelievers out to the last. Genocide against all mankind. To confirm the truth of His words, Allah wished to wipe the unbelievers out to the last. The annihilation of the human race. The conclusion is clear. It, of course, is the justification that is muddled. Mohammad left Yathrib with his militants for the express purpose of robbing an unarmed caravan. He wanted money. His God wanted blood. The dark spirit of Islam wanted to slaughter and humiliate all mankind, all who did not bow to his authority. Quran 8:8, that he might justify the truth and prove false the falsehood, even if the disbelievers disliked it. Now, most people don't prefer to be bludgeoned to death. Most people prefer not to be abducted and held for ransom. Most people don't prefer a religion that glorifies genocide, apartheid, criminal activity. Now, while the writing quality is dreadful, the verse suggests that the people with a functional conscience oppose terror, mass murder, and human trafficking. That made them guilty from Satan's, Allah's perspective. Quranic truth could only be justified by killing men with morals. So Muhammad and his fellow Muslims made a deal with the devil. Quran 8:9. When you were seeking the help of your Lord, He answered you, "Lo, I am going to reinforce you with 1,000 angels, one after another." Obviously, the Quran was as false as its deity. It is beyond comprehension that the creator of the universe would send angels to help murder and abduct innocent men. Moreover, can you imagine angels so feeble it takes 1,000 of them to kill 40 some odd businessmen? But such is the difference between Yahweh and Allah. In defense of Jews in Jerusalem who were being besieged by 185,000 Assyrian soldiers, Yahweh dispatched a single malach, one spiritual implement, just one, working alone without any armed men. And within a matter of minutes, one night, without them being able to wield a single weapon against God's people, the entire Assyrian army outside of Jerusalem, trying to besiege the city, was dead. God's people, as a result of celebrating Chag Matzah and the encouragement of Yashayah, found that Yahweh was willing and able to deliver his own from harm's way. It is something both Jews and Muslims should be mindful. Yahweh will return with Dowd to rescue Yisrael from being besieged by Muslims in league with Satan on Yom Kippurim in year 6000 Yah. the remnant of Yehudim who will be spared during Towrah to witness this evening, October 2nd, 2033 at sunset, will have availed themselves of the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah. I share this with you so that those who want to live with Yahweh know how to survive those who have chosen to die with Allah. And you know when this will occur. Quran 8:10. I'll stop at this verse and we'll pick this up in our next program. Quran 8:10. And it was not made by Allahu other than good tidings, so that your hearts might be at rest with it. And there is no victory except from Allahi. Indeed, Allahi is Almighty, all-wise. Beyond the fact that he was missing 3 verbs and a preposition, as well as a subject. 2 subjects, actually. 3 verbs, 2 subjects, and a preposition were omitted from this single verse. And that the message is incredulous, disgusting. Nice effort there, pal. You know, if you're going to be a demonic snake, you really ought not pretend to be God, because you're really crappy at it. So, and not made Allahu other than good tidings. Yes, good tidings is you're going to go off and kill your extended family members. You're going to bludgeon them to death. You're going to lose your own in the process, but you're going to go off and, for no other reason than to steal their property, you're going to go off and kill your family members, some 40 of them. And then you're going to abduct another 40 that you can ransom, and then you're going to steal their property and quarrel over it. But this is nothing more than good tidings from Allah, so that your hearts can be at rest to this. Don't feel any guilt. Murder is now a religious mandate. It's not a crime. Stealing is a religious ritual. Nothing to be guilty of. Abduction for ransom is a cause célèbre. Let's not be wringing our hands over these kinds of things. I want you to be at rest with it. This is the kind of victory that Allah delivers, because this piece of crap who can't even write, who's grossly immoral, wants you to believe that the devil himself is almighty and all-wise and completely illiterate, immoral, ignorant, irrational, disgusting, murderous. Islam is the most heinous plague ever perpetrated on humankind. Allah's purpose is the annihilation of all human beings. And he does not care how many are tortured and raped and robbed and abused in the process. That is the truth about Islam and the Quran. And we will return to it in our next episode of the YAHOWAH blog. I am your host, Craig Winn.